Before I start, can I ask a question? How many people have already successfully installed? Almost everyone? Yeah, that is great. And how many people are using Docker? Yes, half of them? Cool, cool, cool. So since we have RMG installed, why don't we run an RMG job? And how many people like it's the first time to run an RMG job? Have you run it? Yeah. Yes. So this will be really like tutorial and pedagogic. I hope everyone can learn something from this. So in order to make the RMG thing really visible to people, I'm using the Visual Studio Code. If you have Visual Studio Code, you can use that. And I really recommend if you don't feel comfortable if you are using command line. I know some people are not really like experienced developers, so command lines can be sometimes hard for them. So Visual Studio Code provides you some GUI interface so you can easily visualize the files, edit files, and also it has a terminal integrated, and you can run things within the Visual Studio Code. Be consistent, I will show how to start the Docker container in the Visual Studio Code. But if you just install the RMG in your local environment, you can just open the Visual Studio Code without any issue. This is only for container. So to open a running container, click this button on the left bottom side, and there's a attached to running container. And there's the RMG containers most people just install. Basically, it's the same thing. You run the Docker start RMG container attached in your command line. This part, the bottom right part is the container terminal, which if you don't have Visual Studio Code, VS Code, in short, it's the same thing you have in the terminal. So we'll have RMG Pi and RMG database on the left. If there's nothing, you can click this Explorer and open files. You will see you can select /RMG something, and you can open the file. So I can help with people if people really want to use VS Code. Well, it's another story, and I can help during the break. So okay, let's look at the RMG. In the left part, there's a type of RMG code structure where I will highlight the RMG.py, which is the main script to run RMG jobs and generate mechanisms, which is in the root directory of RMG.py. And since many of you may be pretty new to RMG, there's a folder called examples inside RMG.py. So inside RMG.py examples, there's also like RMG, scripts, and arcane. For this session, we'll focus on the RMG examples. And feel free to take a look at other examples during your spare time to run more complicated RMG jobs. Now we'll only focus on so-called the Superminimal example. It's located in the RMG.py examples, RMG Superminimal. So on the left, you can see this RMG.py. I open the examples, there's RMG. Scroll down to the bottom, and there's Superminimal. I already run the jobs to save some time, but highly possibly there will be just an input file in the folder when you open it. And potentially there can be some Jupyter Notebook, depending on whether you have upgraded your RMG to the latest version or not. So this Superminimal example is trying to generate a mechanism for hydrogen combustion at 1000 K. So this example is pretty small, and we can highly possibly finish it during the session. So let's open the input.py. We'll open it here so you can see it. So this is input.py. don't worry if it's kind of hard to read at the moment. We'll teach you how to write RMG info file in the next few lectures. But for now, I will just go through them pretty quickly. The first section is data sources to let RMG know which data you are referring to. So if you are using some data from RMG database, some libraries you may use, or what's the estimator you're trying to use, something like that. And list of species. So in order to launch a reaction simulation task or RMG task, you need to tell RMG which species are of interest. And for here, it only lists the hydrogen and oxygen, and they will be included in the mechanism. And that's the starting point to expand the mechanism. Then we can define the reaction system. For here, we only consider 1000 K, 1 bar. The initial smaller fraction is 2/3 of hydrogen and 1/3 of oxygen. And there's some terminal criteria, some other settings I won't go through in this section. I think we are all good with this RMG info file. So the next question is really how to run the example. So let's go back to the terminal where I will just show it here. First thing is you have to make sure you have a working terminal. Since we just installed the Docker image, I assume everyone has a working terminal open, right? That's good. If you don't have an open or working terminal or a command prompt, whatever you call it, here's some hints you can follow to open it. And for Dockers, after you open the terminal, you have to run start RMG container attach the Docker to the terminal. Then next thing, very important to make sure is that RMG environment is activated. So the sign you have to look for is there's a parenthesis RMG underscore in before this. This may look slightly different from terminal to terminal, but for most of them it looks like something like this. If you don't have the RMG environment activated, then there's a high chance you will get some error, say the Python or something cannot find some modules. Then we can get into the directory of the Superminimal example. So in the terminal, we use cd for change directory. So for Docker users, you can use cd rmg/rmg. Yeah, you can read it. And for other people, please replace this where you install RMG to the actual RMG location. And there's a missing cd, I guess. So I can demonstrate it. For Visual Studio, you can simply right-click the Superminimal and copy the path, and then do cd here and copy the path. It will directly get you into the directory. And afterwards, we can finally run the script by calling Python gl rmg.py input.py and enter. I won't run it since I already run it. We'll pause here to see if everyone can run without the issue right now. If you want to run, you need to give the full path of RMG. Okay, sounds good. Thank you. So it will be RMG, or the Docker users. Alternatively, you can also do something like this, but you have to give permission to RMG to make it executable. Something like change mode, like 755 to RMG. Once you launch it, it will kind of suspend it here because it's loading the module. So while we are waiting,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Quick question. For the Docker environment, where are these files if I want to actually click on it? Like how do I find it? Because it seems like I have like my RMG file, but that doesn't have this file structure. Where is this file structure?
It's really inside the Docker image.
So is there a way for me to actually, because let's say
Temporarily, temporarily, I guess you can go clear, click on the RMG container,
okay,
and click the files.
so click on the RMG container. Okay, files. Okay, it says replacing container files. Okay.
I think that you can
navigate it.
Yeah, this is another way you can visualize all the files.
Okay.
But you cannot really, edit, I guess. So I recommend you use something like VSCO.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or easier line.
And I guess like I installed VS Code whenever we have the next thing, maybe there's a few things.
Okay, sounds good. If it's successfully run, it will show a lot of prints from the RMG job. Here I show some example. At the very beginning, it was a slow model and the modules and no outputs in there. So please be patient while it's loading modules. Then there's general information about RMG paths, which version you are using, and the copy of RMG input file. All about the how RMG load the database, right? And there's the module enlargement process. So as we can tell, for example, for this iteration, it adds Argon into model, then it adds helium. It is by default, so you can have the inert gases added into RMG by default. And then it's the hydrogen and oxygen, etc. And then we'll try to expand by finding reactions and key species. Something you may want to look at, which can be, which is helpful to debug, is something like, say, not generating reactions for unreactive species. Sometimes it will generate a species that has some weird structure and identify as not important or not real by RMG, and it will mark as unreactive. And then there's other cases where RMG won't correct the activation energy by sound, and so the numbers can be deviates from what the actual numbers are in the database. And at the very bottom, there's a block telling you the RMG model generation is completed and the job is terminated. Yeah. So once you finish the job, you can use ls, which means list directory contents, to show the folders and files inside the Superminimal. Here I listed the most important ones, which is the Contera folder, campaign folder, and the RMS folder, which store the negative files in different formats. Say for Contera folder, it will just have annotated YAML, which has the YAML format that can be readable for Contera. And you can tell for the other folders. And there's a seed and restart from seed.py, which is used for restarting RMG job. How to restart RMG job will be told in the later section. And there's a species folder stores all the important species features. Once you have any problem reading, say, the labels of species, you can look at their features. So if you want to look at the species in the mechanism, you can go into the campaigns and open the camp annotated. There will be species in the first field line.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.